Now, I feel at this point in our course, we have reached something of a culmination. Maybe, finally, with Nietzsche and Marx behind our back, we are ready to present the tentative solution to the riddle of history, right? So, keeping in mind the Nietzschean problematization of this is-ought relationship, right? This notion that from the fact that something makes us happy, we cannot automatically jump to the conclusion that it is good, right? So the transvaluation of values, right? The capital V values are dead. And the Übermensch cannot just accept that happiness or affirmation of life is the objective value. No. It must be, if you want, subjective, free, willful decision on the part of the Übermensch to affirm their own happiness, because nothing else can justify existence, right? So keeping this caveat in mind, this interesting characteristic, like a performative solution, voluntarist maybe if you want, performative solution to the is-ought problem, we could say that the solution to the riddle of history is simply common interest. This is not a very complicated idea. In many ways, it's kind of obvious and goes back to the ancient Greeks. I don't expect anybody to be particularly surprised. And I want to say, obviously, we have to take it with a grain of salt. And Nietzsche would urge us, right, to look into the potential irrationality and the potential self-deception of human beings, right? So we shouldn't be too facetious. We shouldn't jump too fast to the conclusion that we know what common interest is or how to achieve it. But like in general, I feel that there's a bit of a reality check that from the ancients like Epicurus and Buddha, actually the solution to the riddle of human existence was known all along. Individuals are trying to be happy, and human societies, collectively, are trying to achieve their common interest, which is human individual happiness or flourishing. Right? And I feel that there's something satisfying in the fact that it's a very simple solution that I feel most people can, at least in principle, agree with, and the solution that was known and available to humanity since time immemorial. I feel that there's something satisfactory about that. Now, having said that, right, I feel that even though the philosophical task in theory is simple, in reality, how to actually find out what the common interest is and how to actually arrive at the institutions, society which is structurally instituted in such a way so as to best serve the common interest. Now that may be very difficult, right? So to theoretically imagine what the goal is and to practically reach the goal are two very different things. And I want to say that, I feel that at the end of the day, political philosophy, if we can trust this picture, political philosophy is actually simple, at least in terms of basic values, establishing the basic values, but putting them into practice may be extremely difficult, and it's not clear if humanity is even up to the challenge. Again, I'm always reminded of the one potential solution to the Fermi paradox, the notion of the great filters, that actually most intelligent life that arises throughout the universe is actually doomed to destroy itself. And again, Marx reminds us in the first paragraph of the Communist Manifesto that very often class struggle ends with the common ruin of the contending classes. And in the 21st century, it's far easier to imagine humanity destroying itself, right? Now, having said that, I have to remind everybody, right, that this relies on very strong and potentially controversial assumptions about human nature, right? So first of all, this notion that human beings are pro-social, in the sense that human beings can only flourish in well-constituted societies. We require each other to be properly human and properly happy. A child abandoned in the woods, abandoned in the forest, does not survive and certainly does not become happy. But on the other hand, an important notion is also that human beings are incomplete. Again, this is what Rousseau talked about. Rousseau described by human perfectibility. We are imperfect. We need to be perfected by society. There are certain blanks within the human psyche, and human societies need to fill in the blanks, right? So Rousseau talks about perfectibility, and David Hume and John Stuart Mill will talk about habituation. David Hume talks about artificial virtues. In Hume and Mill. Again, this notion that society is artificial, that needs to artificially, we need to, human individuals throughout history, or in general, like throughout history, human societies develop through particular cultural mechanisms which are not straightforwardly natural, and then well-ordered societies complete the human individuals in such a way as to produce pro-social individuals, to reinforce, to stabilize the social bond. So this is one part of the complication. The second complication, and we'll actually devote 2 of our last classes to discussing the second complication in great detail, is like, even if we agree that we want to achieve the common interest, what are the obstacles? What are the main obstacles, and is it possible to overcome them, right? So let me rephrase once again. So this collective and individual project is defending myself and society, right? Defending from what? From external coercive influences that try to lead myself astray and that try to lead society astray. Again, in many ways, I feel that the common ground between philosophers such as Mill, Marx, and Nietzsche, but also Hegel, is again this notion of free and equal discussion, free equal development, free equal flourishing of human individuals in a well-ordered society. But this domain of free individuality and this domain of well-ordered society needs to be protected from what? From irrational passions, from false traditional prejudice. So again, this is the, let's say, Hume and Mill's project of, radical reformist project of trying to put the science of politics on a secure foundation, right? But also, in addition to these irrational passions and false prejudice, there's also problems, like the free rider problem of corruption and nepotism, that very often individuals who find themselves in key positions in society or within the government can abuse positions of power, right, for their own selfish, narrow interest, right? For Rousseau would talk about this in terms of factional interest and also private interests, right? But over and above that, like these 3, I feel, are fairly straightforward and fairly understandable even to the person in the street. And again, the necessity to fight against these things in order to constitute, to establish a well-constituted society is fairly clear. But in addition to this, we see other problems, right? And when we talk about irrationality, of course, Nietzsche has a lot to say about this, and especially how we overestimate our own rationality, and how we believe that we are self-transparent, how self-transparent and self-controlling, whereas in fact, Nietzsche has this wonderful metaphor about how the conscious brain is far from the coils of the intestines, right? So presumably, the functioning of our intestines is a very important part of the human constitution. But we neither understand what goes on there, nor do we control it. Again, the notion of the unconscious, unconscious drives, unconscious motives. Again, this human ability to lie to others and to lie to ourselves. And again, before Freud, Nietzsche uses the metaphor of the tiger, right? How the conscious self is like a rider on the tiger. The rider mistakenly thinks that the rider is in control, whereas in fact it is the tiger, the unconscious, irrational tiger, who steers the course. Might be more difficult to take control of the tiger than appears at the first glance, right? But in addition to this, and these are the unique contributions of Marx that we talked about last time. Again, this notion of the coercive laws of competition in the market. Again, this is what Marcuse will later call the performance principle, the drive for efficiency's sake. I feel Nietzsche has a certain taste to it, but in general, I feel he underappreciates this dynamic to a very large extent, right? Again, these structural anonymous forces that take control of society, subvert society, not in any one particular person's interest or even in an interest of a particular group, right? It's very important that capitalism alienates all of us, for Marx, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat alike. And transition to the potential future communist society for Marx is the unchaining of the human creative potential is the first beginning. Communism is the first stage of human history where free human individuality takes control. I talk about individuality, right? So communist individuality as opposed to capitalist collectivism. Capitalism produces us like in a mass-produced fashion, right? As if we are all mass-produced on a factory, right? So this is, again, another interesting point of contact between Nietzsche and Foucault. But then, lastly, there's another point which we will talk about in classes to come, something that we have had very little occasion to talk about, something that most philosophers we discussed do not really appreciate very much, and neither does Marx and neither does Nietzsche. Again, this I suppose this is first and foremost associated with the name of Max Weber. Again, this notion of the coercive logic, again, what Weber calls legal rational action, legal rationality, legalistic rationality, this coercive bureaucratic logic of this raison d'etat, right, reason of state. Kind of both of these logic, I mean, these are two logics, different logics of structural systems which exist over and above the individuals, right? So this efficiency for the sake of efficiency, market efficiency for the sake of market efficiency, if you want profit for the sake of profit, or power for the sake of power, state power for the sake of power. Again, both of these driven by competitions between systems, competitions between capitalist enterprises or competitions between socioeconomic modes of production, and here competitions between sovereign states. And within these competitions, the individuals become pawns, lose their individual control, and somehow end up at the mercy of these, again, larger forces of, as I kept talking about, biological and cultural evolution, again, manufactured by these forces. It's a great task in an important sense to defend ourself and society, to defend the free and equal discussion and the free and equal development of individuality from the coercive laws of market competition, the coercive laws of bureaucratic raison d'etat. This amounts to nothing less than a rebellion, individual rebellion against natural selection, against cultural selection. Antonio Gramsci has this wonderful phrase of how, he says, revolution in Russia is revolution against Capital, revolution against Das Kapital, revolution against the iron laws of history, right? And it's a very precarious enterprise. We hope, the modern philosophers, 20th century philosophers like Antonio Gramsci or like Michel Foucault or like Jürgen Habermas, I feel are in the business of, or maybe Pierre Bourdieu, are in the business of trying to protect the individual and the society from the encroachment of these logics. But it is a precarious task. The success is not given. It is a real struggle that can be won or can be lost. And in fact, it is a struggle in which the odds are stacked against us. Because ultimately, if we can learn anything from Darwin, again in this world of the abyss of the purposeless chaos of matter, we have laws of selection. We have selection pressures, mechanisms of selection. The companies that stay in business are the most efficient companies, not the most humane companies. The socio-economic systems that win against their competitors, the sovereign states that win against their competitors are not necessarily the humane states, but the more efficient states that can subdue and organize the individual capacities, right, to channel the productive capacities for their own benefits, right? And so in this sense, somebody like Habermas would say that we need the strong institutions of civil society, of this free and equal discussion, to protect from these two dual threats, from other threats as well, but especially from these two dual threats. And again, I want to stress, I hope that maybe this course is my small and humble contribution to this battle, which I think is a real struggle, which can be won, but also can be lost. And winning this struggle, fighting and hopefully winning this struggle is, I feel, the greatest task that lies before humanity and, intelligent and thinking human beings in the 21st century. It's a bit of a bombastic and maybe slightly self-serving conclusion, but I mean it quite seriously. And hopefully, you engaging with this course, again, and me teaching this course, right? We're in this together. Hopefully, taking this course helps your individual project, this private anti-political solution to the problem of politics, which ultimately bleeds into the collective solution. Because at the end of the day, human beings are social creatures, social beings, dependent on societies. We can only be properly human and properly happy in well-ordered societies. The second best is the individual project, but the first best is the collective project. So hopefully, at the end of the day, this course is not just a channeling of the indoctrination of the capitalist market ideology or something like that, but is actually contributing, at least in some small part, to my free development, your free development, which is ultimately, again, the free development of each as the condition for the free development of all. I've had these three slogans, which I finished our class last time. Yes, so what I gave you in these lectures, hopefully, is a vision in which the free development of each is only possible against the background of the free development of all. But at the same time, if you look at the logic of the systems, we are led to pessimism. Again, as Antonio Gramsci says, it's optimism of the will, optimism and activity of the will, but definitely pessimism of the intellect. But at the end of the day, we have no choice. Because, it's tendentious conclusion, but still, socialism or barbarism. It's like, unless we embrace the optimism of the intellect and follow through with this project of defense of civil society, we are doomed. So we might as well try our best.